Right, so we're going to start on this story here from the COVID era, looking at corruption, which everybody knows that's actually looked at it. There was so much corruption on, firstly, the policies that were put in, also the contracts that were given to certain different people for PPE and so on, and a lot of people made a lot of money. But this corruption review has found, a lot of these things that we already knew, but they're starting to make it public now. A lot of red flags in more than 130 of the contracts that were given out. So let's look at this to start with then.
Well, it's kind of ironic that this has come out in the same week that the Starmer government has taken away winter fuel payments to millions of pensioners and old people, and the same week in which hundreds of millions of pounds more has been handed over to, or announced to be handed over to Ukraine. And what this story is about is Corruption Review finds red flags in more than 130 COVID contracts. An anti-corruption charity says it has identified significant concerns in contracts worth over 15.3 billion awarded by the Conservative government during the COVID pandemic, equivalent to 1 in every £3 spent. And if you look at the Conservative government, but let's not forget that the Starmer then opposition wanted everything the Conservative Party did in terms of restrictions and rolling out of the fake vaccine and masks and all of it, except they wanted it more extreme, lockdowns too. And they've found, it's called Transparency International UK, 28 contracts worth £4.1 billion went to firms with known political connections, while 51 worth £4 billion went through a VIP lane for companies recommended by MPs and peers, a practice the High Court has ruled as unlawful. So the charity said that its analysis also indicated that almost 2/3 of high-value contracts to supply items such as masks and protective medical equipment during the fake pandemic added up to 30.7 billion and were awarded without competition.
Yep.
So the corruption is staggering. And when the Starmer government talks about this more than 20 billion black hole in the finances, which they're using as an excuse to bring in very draconian financial measures pretty soon. But there you have it plus on top of that. And of course, you've got the Starmer government has spent billions already, including about 11 billion that's going to go to overseas countries for climate change measures. And there's no way, and 600 million suddenly is found for Ukraine.
On top of the 3 billion they already committed.
But pensioners being cold is not a problem. And it's very, very important that people, I'm sure many are now, but they grasp the level of contempt that these people in political, quote, power, the real powers behind them, have for the population. And on the subject of COVID, I want to talk this week about something that is crucial for people to understand. And that's the connection between the electromagnetic field technologically generated, which they're calling the cloud. It's being generated by 5G towers in the towns and the cities, and crucially from low orbit satellites of people like Musk's SpaceX and others, but particularly them, and how that relates to the self-replicating nanotechnology that's unfolding in the bodies of people who have had the fake COVID vaccine. The connection is that this cloud is designed to be the vehicle, the electromagnetic vehicle, to communicate frequencies to this self-replicating technology, to create what I've been warning about for decades, which is the human hive mind, which ultimately could be centrally controlled in the sense of AI will deliver the perceptions and emotional reactions and behavior traits to the population from a central point. Now, the reason I raise it this week is because there's been a study out of South Korea and the Far East, which has concluded that there is self-replicating nanotechnology in the bodies of the COVID fake vaccinated. And you know a guy called John Campbell.
Yep.
Now, John Campbell is a Dr. John Campbell, but he's not a medical doctor. He's a doctor of philosophy. He's a nurse educator, retired. And you'll remember that he was pushing all the official story of the COVID hoax. He was pushing all the propaganda, and he was promoting the fake vaccine. And he built up a massive YouTube presence, and he's still on YouTube, so he's no threat to the system, to say the least, or he wouldn't be. He then started to realize that lots of people were dying, and he connected it to the fake vaccine, and now he's become a kind of anti-COVID hero. Yeah. However, he did a video on this Far Eastern study about the self-replicating technology, and it got a lot of promotion, but on social media, etc. But all this study is doing is confirming previous studies going back years that have found exactly the same. You know, I've got this connection with people who do these studies, including very much La Quinta Columna, the research group in Spain, who first kind of exposed the fact that graphene oxide was in these vials, the significance of which will come to in a second. So John Campbell did this, and then he posted this soon afterwards. Several friends were uncomfortable with this paper on nanostructures. I have therefore deleted my video report on this paper until its scientific validity or otherwise is clarified. Well, John, I only wish you'd have done that when you were pushing the official narrative on COVID and the fake vaccines that turn out to be absolute lies. He said, it is good that we have such a global community of expertise to advise in near real time. So he's taken it down. You know, if he's worried about the study, then what you do is you say, look, I've been contacted by people who say they have doubts about this study. So, just take it for what it is, make your own mind up, and let's see where it goes from here. But you'd leave it up.
Yes, you would. Yeah.
Because, and something he doesn't mention, is that these other studies have confirmed this exactly the same. You see the footage of this self-replicating technology that seems to have some form of consciousness almost, building these structures in the body. You can see it. And there are many examples. I was sent this footage by La Quinta Columna. And what they did is put a vial of the fake vaccine in an incubator at body temperature. You will know that these vials have to be kept in extremely low cold conditions. in some instances colder than Antarctica.
Yep.
Because, well, obviously the way that it's playing out in my perception is that there's something there that is activated by body temperature.
Yep.
So what La Quinta Columna did was to put it in a incubator at body temperature. And what they started out with was basically clear. And then it started to appear. And you can see here the extraordinary kind of patterns of change that are happening the longer that this incubation period went on. And others have found similar things around the world. If you go to davidicke.com, there's a number of videos, from people in Costa Rica, in Argentina, and other places that have confirmed this. So what is actually going on? Well, it's my view, and has been for a long time, that these low orbit satellites that are going up, not least through SpaceX and Musk, and all these 5G towers, etc., they are creating this electromagnetic cloud, which is expanding all the time. And it's one of its key roles is to communicate with the receiver system of this self-replicating nanotechnology to get into the brain, for instance, etc. And I found this week. In fact, Fred, our producer, found this and sent it to me. It's just a video that gives you an idea of just how many of these so-called Starlink SpaceX satellites, low orbit, are going up. And this is only between 2019 and 2023. There's even more now, but have a look at this.
When you watch that video and you see particularly the last 3 years, how exponential it's been, there can't be a blade of grass on the earth now that's not reached by one of these satellites. So it's being built. And even the pattern it creates, when you see the picture, it's like that cloud image that you see of connectivity around the world. I don't get how people aren't talking about this that follow Musk, because he's not really hiding it. He tweets about it.
Well, as I've said many times over the last year or so, the moment that he bought Twitter, Musk bought Twitter X, the overwhelming central core, in fact, the central core of the hijacked alternative media stopped calling him out on any of this stuff. Yeah. So, he's bought himself a Twitter X company, which has basically protected him from what should be serious scrutiny 100%. Because of what is happening. Now, the key, or one of the kind of keys to, or the key really in many ways, but it's not the only one, to this receiver system in the body, in the vials, is something called graphene oxide. Now, graphene oxide is a superconductor of electricity. Now, this is, and it's in the vials, and it's very, very significant not least because the brain processes information electrically. It communicates with the rest of the body communicates with the brain electrically. And if you can mess with that electrical system and in effect rewire it through graphene oxide, then you can not only affect the nature of the so-called physical body, you can change the personality and the perceptions of the people involved. And I know how many people have pointed out over these last few years how many people they know who've had multiple fake vaccines who are just not the same person anymore. They talk about them being vacant and stuff like that.
You see that in everyday life. The amount of people that you look and there's no one at home anymore.
No one at home anymore. And we can go into deeper levels of that on another occasion because it's basically disconnecting the body mind from expanded consciousness. That's what it's actually doing. So this whole thing about graphene oxide in the vials is not new. Where does anyone really talk about this anywhere except in the real alternative media? But it goes back years that this was exposed. And here's a video from March 2022, just to give you an idea of this. And it's Dr. Robert Verkerk, scientist, founder of the Alliance for Natural Health International. And what he's talking about here, like I say, in 2022, early 2022, is graphene in these vials and what it's capable of.
Graphene is a pretty new substance. It was discovered in 2004. It has very potent electron transport properties. It really lends itself rather beautifully to nano electronic devices. I've been following some of the work that was being done looking at behavioral changes in animals that were being carried out specifically with the purpose of mind control. And that work has been published in major journals. So the people who have suggested there may be a link between 5G or 6G electronic devices and graphene are not barking up a conspiracy theory tree. There is genuine reason to be concerned about the linkage between those two things. It's also fantastically strong substance, 200 times stronger than steel. It can be layered into different layers. Raman spectroscopy is one way of determining those layers. Coming back to the UK, there has been a group in Cambridge headed by Andrea Ferrari that's done a lot of the work in terms of characterizing exactly what graphene is basically very closely related to graphite, but it has this these very specific properties in terms of electron transport and use in nanotechnology.
Well, I think you were talking, I think, before the vaccine even came out, and various people were about the fact that this was going to be in it. And obviously it's a very much undisclosed ingredient. It's not on the back of the packet, is it? And the dangers that this would cause, and we've seen that. Going back to, I guess, what you were talking about with the creating structures as well, is this something that you think amplifies over time? So people that have had it maybe might say, well, I'm fine. Over time, this influence could get stronger.
Well, you've used the right word there, amplify. Another thing to mention about graphene oxide is that it amplifies electromagnetic fields, right? So if you've got graphene oxide in the body, and it's not just going into people through the fake vaccine, and increasingly, as they move other vaccines to the same system, more and more, there's whistleblowers who talk about graphene oxide being in the chemtrails.
Yeah.
It's in lots of things now because they're trying to get this stuff into you because it's the receiver system. It's more than that. I go into it in the books, into deeper levels of it, but this is the key crucial level. It's the receiver of what is planned to be and is unfolding, the hive mind coming through this technologically generated electromagnetic field. And so what Robert Verkerk goes on to talk about is the impact of graphene oxide in the body, and how you can see it by its vibrational frequency signature in the body. So let's have a look at this. It's again March 2022. This is not new. It's just not getting out there.
Just remember when you look at these images that we're only meant to be seeing, in the case of Moderna, lipid nanoparticles with this very fragile mRNA in it. Now, immediately you start to see things that don't look like that. Should ring the alarm bells. In a normal situation, I've been involved as a scientist in many food adulteration cases. And as soon as you see something like this, normally you can just knock on the door of the National Medicines Regulator, the MHRA in the UK, and go, look what we found. And they'll pick it up and go after the company. In this case, we all believe that the system is too corrupt to be able to do that. But you'll see just from microscopy, you have a problem. When you start looking at the spectra, now you'll see, for example, on the top left, you'll see that very big peak. That aligns absolutely with the spectrum that you would expect for graphene. But you'll see it's pretty noisy. And it's very noisy because there's a bunch of things in, some of which are fluorescent. So they are reflecting, they're scattering more light. But it's very key that we're seeing that tall peak at exactly the spectrum that is expected for graphene composites. When you go to Pfizer, again, you'll see a whole range of ribbons, filaments, nano dots, all the things that were viewed as some generally conspiracy theories, and they appear to be there. Again, they should not be there. Exactly what they are is defined here by some Raman spectroscopy. There are other ways of doing more detailed characterization, and that's something that I've been talking to the scientists about. Once again, both in terms of counts, you'll see the graphene composites in a 2 centimeter spectrum, and they outnumber everything else. You'll see, again, they have these signature peaks around graphene in them. Same applies to the AstraZeneca as well. So I just want to conclude by saying that it's pretty clear that graphite composite forms as undeclared ingredients are very common in the vials. The Raman spectra were not crystal clear because they were confounded by a lot of noise and fluorescence. What is visible through microscopy appears to be in the form of ribbons, sheets, tubular forms, nano dots, and nano scrolls. And it is our view that further studies should be carried out on more detailed characterization of the forms, more quantification, more studies on function. Why are they there? Obviously, on toxicology. These are all things that are required, even if you're going to be putting natural nanoparticulates into food. Here we have an undeclared, adulterated drug that we can't knock on the door of the regulators with because they're in deep. And you'll see that there were a number of other spectra that were shown up that suggest that other substances that are not declared on the label are also there.
I mean, it's incredible to see that people's attitude when they've had the vaccine, or know people that have, unless something happens immediately, like they get ill or they drop dead, which is what has been the case in some, there's nothing. They think everything's fine. But all these things that you can see in these videos are happening in the background inside your body that you can't see, that at some point are going to have an impact, whether that's physical, psychological, personality, whatever, as we've spoken about. So it feels like a lot of people are just walking around blind to what's about to happen.
Well, everybody, literally everybody, is different. It has its own kind of nature. I mean, obviously, it's very similar, but there are differences between people, and therefore they're going to react to this stuff in different ways. Some are going to be impacted very quickly because the body can't make that transition, and we've seen them in death and health destruction on a phenomenal scale. And then there's others who are they're able to go with this transition. And they won't be affected on the face of it so much. Yeah. But eventually, of course, the nature of their body, it becomes a receiver of information that is specific to this hive mind. And so people are under pressure, if you like, through this, to go with whatever this hive mind is telling them to go with and perceive, and how to see the world and everything. And of course, where it's going is to make people docile, to make people subordinate to authority, not to question anything. But I will say this, and I go into this in the reveal. If you can open your mind, open your body mind to expanded levels of consciousness, the true I, you can override this stuff. But if you're only stuck in the five sense reality perception of the world, you are in that frequency band that this is all piling in on. You can override it by becoming conscious beyond that, and it's what we call awakening, but not just awakening to political manipulation, awakening to the nature of the true I, which of course I've talked about for 35 years now. So we are also looking at people. I mean, and I know the people who are looking at ways to get this stuff out of the body. And I'm looking at studies at the moment, and natural substances that have been developed. When I become convinced that this is actually effective, then I'll let everybody know what I found, because that's very, very important. If there's anything that can get this stuff out, flush the body of it, then that's going to be fantastic for all those people who've been jabbed because of what's planned for them. But it's again, the alternative media that's been hijacked needs to get its arse together and start looking at this in detail, in focus, because this is the real key to why they were so fantastically determined to get this stuff in as many, this fake COVID vaccine in as many people as possible.
It almost sounds like, the whole concept of in the spy world, they used to have sleeper cells, somebody that would be mind controlled, and then it would be put to one side, they'd go on their everyday life, and then they'd have something that would kind of activate their job, whatever that was, to go and do. Kind of feels like that a little bit, doesn't it? Where the graphene's in the body and people might not be necessarily noticing too much and they're going about their everyday lives. But as soon as that cloud, that electromagnetic connection is activated, then all of a sudden its influence will become obvious. Yeah,
well, it will become obvious maybe to an extent. But of course, when this hive mind starts dictating your perceptions, people will think it's their own thoughts. Yeah. So this is the thing. And this is another reason why this stuff needs to really get out there, so that when people start, thinking completely differently to how they did before, maybe if they've still retained some consciousness, they can say, well, why am I thinking differently now? And realize, because, the worst thing you can do is to be unaware of what's happening. Once you become aware of something, you basically, it's the difference between walking in a boxing ring to fight someone with your arms down here, right? Yeah. Unawareness, and going in like that, where you are aware that this is happening, because that awareness can instigate that consciousness response that can start to override it and push back on it. But if you're completely unaware, then you just start all these people that say, since he's had the jab, he's like vacant. He's just not the same bloke. But he'll think he is. Yeah. this is the point, and this is why this awareness of this has to be pushed out everywhere, and it's not being.
Yeah, if you're mind controlled, you're or under a spell, you're usually unaware you are under a spell or mind controlled.
That's exactly the word, the spell. In my books over the years, going back decades, I remember there was one a long, long time ago where I had 3 chapters casting the spell, basically maintaining the spell and breaking the spell, because it is a spell. It's a perceptual spell, and awakening is what happens when you break out of the spell. Because awakening is really deprogramming. Yeah. That's what it really is.